my whole project largely revolves around art as a sort of metaphysical ideal. Not metaphysics in the literal sense, but in representing something sacred and sublime. That life itself is about beautification. That war, in its essence, is actually an artistic expression. That the artist wages war on life when he destroys other beings for the purpose of creating something beautiful. That is war. That is violence. Violence is at the forefront of all beauty and all creation. Write your life like a line of poetry written with a splash of blood. Commit spiritual seppuku and be reborn. Be reincarnated as something greater. Salvete, legionaries. I am joined by the co-consul of the Nova Roma Imperium, honored legate, General Lance, from Lance's Legion. And of course, I'm your host, the warrior philosopher, Patrick Soltikov, the true Tsar of the Russian Empire, and I will attain my crown once more when the White Russian exiles who were pushed out by the Bolsheviks return and retake the throne and retake the empire. But today, in lieu of the preparations for our great Siberian revival and our great march on Moscow, we will be discussing one of the most important philosophers of the 20th century, Martin Heidegger, and specifically going over his essay called The Question Concerning Technology, which is referring to the essence of technology and how we as humans ought to engage with technology in such a way where we can maintain a free relationship with it, avoid falling into that paradigm of reductionism and of this mind goblin addicted to artificial stimuli that I sort of portray in Promethean Dreams and so on and so forth. But without further ado, welcome here, Lance, and any opening words from you to the legionaries.
Yeah, greetings and salutations, honored lords and ladies. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a long time coming. I mean, you and I have spoken about Heidegger for a while in passing, and of course, at first it was a passing interest that only slowly has reinforced an interest as time has gone on. And to be frank with you, he's probably one of the most important seminal thinkers of our time, and he's almost ahead of his time, if time and being is to be anything to be considered. And 100 years on, almost 100 years on, I mean, his treatise, Being in Time, came out in 1927. So we're just 2 years shy of that 100-year mark, and so I think it's almost prescient that we start talking about him, because there's such enormous potential and ramifications of his ideas. So thank you so much for having me on, and I'm really pleased to be here. Basically, it's about time that we start talking about him. I mean, there's just been so much. It's been 100 years since he wrote his first treatise, Being in Time. At least any that got any currency, and I think it's especially now with people like Dugan, for instance, really kind of bringing his name into the foreground of the Zeit and the ramifications. It really merits the deep dive into Heidegger, and I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. And I think the first thing to sort of present in relation to this essay is Heidegger's conception of being. When he's talking about the being of technology, it's not so much what technology is, but how technology is going to evolve in time and throughout time, and how it engages with existence, how it engages with other beings. That's what's really important about Heidegger's definition of being. It isn't so much as what is. So, for example, when we talk about the self, it isn't similar to, for example, the Platonists who try to define the self in a static, sort of concretized way. It more is relating to how the self, how the being engages with other being, what the trajectory of our being will be throughout time in relation to all these different factors. And when it comes to technology, it's the same thing. And I'll read a little quote here to illustrate that. Technology is not equivalent to the essence of technology. When we are seeking the essence of tree, we have to become aware that which pervades every tree, as tree, is not itself a tree that can be encountered among all other trees. So as to say, it's not so much exactly what technology is. We can say, what is artificial intelligence? Okay, well, we can say that general artificial intelligence is artificial intelligence to the point that it can intentionally act in such a way, it can intentionally interact without human oversight. That's saying what technology is, but that isn't necessarily exploring the being of artificial intelligence and the trajectory that artificial intelligence will endure and go through, which is a much more interesting question. So when we talk about the essence of technology, Heidegger is looking at technology and he's saying, well, how is it going to develop over time? How is our relationship with technology going to develop over time? What is sort of inevitably the trajectory of technology? And this is where things like Gestel and Bestand come into view. And Gestel being in framing, Bestand being standing reserve. And it's essentially this view that Heidegger has of technology, where it gets to be to the point where everything is sort of reduced, right? We get into this scientific positivist framework where you can come up with perfect formulas to balance chemicals in somebody's brain, to give them this sort of mind fucking of pleasure. You can turn people into these sort of catatonic, neurotic beings if you give them the right pill, you give them their Xanax, you give them their Zoloft, right? You start to construct reality in such a way where you know exactly what everything is going to do. For example, imagine if we could have virtual realities or simulations, similar to my book Promethean Dreams, where everything is regulated to the most minute detail, and you can create this alternate reality, right, where people can engage with it and they can be much happier in that virtual reality than they can in real life. This is where you get technology and you get it to the point where it controls everything, and you lose that uncertainty, that beautiful uncertainty where things like art come out from, which provides the pain and suffering, which gives people this desire, this wanting, because they don't have, right? When technology gets to a certain point where you reduce everything to its granular composition, and how can you recompose, how you can transform these very minute details in such a way that you have a very specific outcome. And I'm using the example now in regards to medicine, in regards to simulations, right? Virtual reality. You already see this in video games to a certain extent. And I droned on a little bit there, Lance, but that's sort of the first thing I wanted to provide, is that his conception of being is about how being evolves rather than exactly, well, what is this? That's not the important question. What is important, but what's really important is what will it become? What is the coming to be of the essence of technology? And
Right.
maybe you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, Heidegger is one of these famously, or rather infamously, obscure kind of writers who has a lot of idiosyncrasies regarding terminology that he uses. In addition to him being not a very, he's a very mystical writer. I mean, he was a Jesuit and very much a theologian in many ways, in the Jesuit kind of like scholastic tradition, which is to take an idea to its logical conclusion, right? And in this, let's say, exploration, contemplative exploration, he really mulled over the idea of technology as such. And what he's saying, and what obviously a Warrior was saying specifically, was talking about the idea that technology has its own will, its own specific and self-enclosed way of being in life, and it manifests its own, how do you say, destiny, right? It has it circumscribes life around it, and it is not in and of itself a let's say it's not in and of itself revealed its totality as a being itself, but it is something which, how do you say, it's something that has its own logic and pursues its own ends to its own kind of center of gravity. I don't know if I'm making sense myself, because it's one of these things like, Heidegger is kind of like, when he posits about the questions of being, right? I mean, this is a call back to the pre-Socratics on the question of what being is, like the sense of being in time, and these very important Greek concepts of how a being is not something you can really intellectualize in the way, let's say, the Soviet Union intellectualized and quote unquote rationally deduced this, what it meant to be a certain thing. It is something that you can only act in the world, and in so acting be revealed. It already exists before you even know it, and it is only through action in time and space that you reveal your nature, the totality of a nature of a thing. And so technology is just the same, in the sense that it can only be understood in time, over time in application of its space, and it circumscribes and is adversarial to other wills, other types of nature in their quest for becoming or being, right? So, it's very interesting because he talks about being, and I hope I'm not droning on myself, but it's he's one of these guys that's really, really difficult to actually kind of just really give a clean example or terminology. But what I'm talking about is a becoming, right? Because in his eyes, we are a totality that is revealed over time, and because we are sentient beings living in time, it is perceived as a becoming. Am I making sense? I apologize if I'm not, but this
No,
is kind of like,
absolutely.
yeah, this is my first thought as far as just conceptualizing what we're trying to talk about before we really deep dive into what he means by, um, by being in time, by technology, and what the implications of that are.
Absolutely. And I think sort of defining some of his key vocabulary is essential here. We are talking about the essence of technology after all. And I think it's actually quite, I really like he occasionally he goes to German words and occasionally he pulls back to the Greek words. But some of the more important words that probably are going to be spoke quite often in this podcast, of course, is techne, right? Technology. And he's sort of portraying techne as this means of transforming the world and revealing the world through craft, right? Technology and craft take up a lot of different interpretations. Of course, our modern conception of technology might be the iPhone, a sort of consumer technology. It might be the computer, but technology really goes as simply as metal crafting. For example, the blacksmith is engaging in techne; he's engaging in craft, and we see revolutionary uses of technology even as early as 2000 BC with the Iron Age invaders, of course, sweeping across the plains, the Yamnaya turning into lots of different Aryan peoples. We have the Vedics going down to India. We have the Iranians going down to modern day Iran, so on and so forth. The Dorians. Yeah, I could go on and on. So that is also technology. The ironworking, right? Art is sort of a craft as well, and of course, when we look at Heidegger's original sort of exploration of the role of technology in society and looking to the Greek days, he sees this more free and artistic expression of of the use of technology, right? And it's almost like techne is a completely different word from technology, right? It is craft. It is indeed craft, and he sort of sees the use of craft in this day as a sort of poetic bringing forth of of resultant property of something of creation. And of course, we'll go into the four causes as well that Aristotle sort of brings up. But what we see here is it goes back to the other words that I was mentioning before, which is gestel and framing, which is sort of modern technology's ability to over conceal. Later on in the essay, he says the concealment capabilities of modern technology is gone too far. And it views the world as bestan, standing reserve, something to be exploited, something to be used, something to be stripped of any sublimity. And this is where we get into the realm of pornography, virtual reality, uh, antidepressants, all these different things. It strips the sublime. For example, when we look at pornography, it strips the sublime from sex. Right now, sex is just this fix. It's just snap of the fingers. You jerk off to some pornography. Boom. You have your fix. You fucking come. There's no beauty of fucking in that anymore. There's no
Right.
beauty of seduction. There's no beauty of pursuit. There's not the sublime exchange of life force, right? You think of something like sex, you're literally bringing life into the world. This is something so beautiful, and it's been reduced into jerking off to an electronic image on your screen while you're sitting half-ass naked on your toilet at 12 a.m. Like, there's nothing beautiful in that, right?
Right.
So that's sorry to be crass to the legionaries, but I'm trying to illustrate in modern examples something like
But it is
Bistan.
disgusting. It is
Yeah,
that's the emotion that you're trying to evoke, because it is disgusting in that, like, I mean, think about it this way: we're using a proxy for something that has a more holistic application. And I mean, your body physiologically knows the difference between obviously masturbation and sexual intercourse. It knows that physiologically, it knows that hormonally, And I mean, there are multiple studies that have shown this specifically, especially when it comes to testosterone and so on, and fecundity and etc. And so, yeah, I mean, the threat is pervasive, and because humans, with their ape mind, right? Their ape mind is only capable of really approximating a tangential utility to what nature itself is a master sculptor of. And so we have that kind of manifestation of a kind of joke, um, let's say, joke derivative of something more deep, infinitely more, let's say, integrating with the human soul. So go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. Feel free to interrupt whenever. But yeah, so I'm sort of portraying one such example of where we do that in the world. But of course, it goes a lot further than that. Specifically, the example that he uses is that the modern man will see a forest and see it only for what that wood from that forest can produce, rather than the beauty, the ethereal beauty of that piece of nature, the beautiful forest, right? Seeing it through an artistic lens. And like I said, a lot of his critique of technology isn't a critique of what technology is, but it's a critique of how technology, the essence of technology, can evolve if humans do not retain their mastery over technology. And of course, there's a direct quote to illustrate that when talking about our need. This is an existential problem to Heidegger, and I think it's more pertinent today more than ever. Our necessity to stay in the driver's seat, which is riding the waves of technology forward and into the future. We have to retain our agency and free will. I think this is one of the less explored aspects of Heidegger. Is he really is this purporting such a strong necessity for agency, whether it's his view of being, whether it's his view of reality. It's very unconstraining, and it's attempting to get rid of the constraints. And here's one such constraint: is the domination of technology over humanity itself. The will, the essence of technology engrossing us and engulfing us like a monster. So I'll read this quote here. But this much remains correct. Modern technology, too, is a means to an end. That is why the instrumental conception of technological conditions, every attempt to bring man into the right relation to technology. Everything depends on our manipulating technology in the proper manner as a means. We will, as we say, get technology spiritually in hand. We will master it. The will to mastery becomes all the more urgent the more technology threatens to slip from human control. And I think it's quite interesting because you have a dialogue of this very idea with these e-accelerationists today, largely taking from Nick Land's philosophy, where technology does overtake humanity and we lose the agency to be involved in the progress of the future. And I think this is something very scary. And I'm not saying to be afraid of technology, because again, Heidegger is not a Luddite about technology. He actually says later on in the essay, I'm not saying to treat technology as neutral. He uses that exact terminology. Do not treat technology as a neutral thing. We have to be engaged with it. I think this is where saving power comes into play as well, is that in our dialogue, in our relationship with technology, and in understanding technology and in engaging with it, it also increases our ability to understand it in such a way that we can retake the driver's seat, that we can continue to have agency and to be
Yes.
involved in the formation and the uses of technology. Because if you're a Luddite and you take yourself out of the equation, you act like an Amish person. Like, you think the Amish aren't going to eventually get the negative effects of not being involved in the political, of not being involved in this existential battle? No, they can go on living their non-technological lifestyle. But what happens when Mr. Terminator comes in and bangs his wife and kills his children, right? But I avoided technology, please. Well, too bad. Because you avoided technology, you also avoided the instrument of power, the key instrument of power, which is going to form the future, which is going to mold the future, which is how you transform the future. And you weren't a part of it. You said, no, I'm not going to be involved in technology. And now your wife's getting banged by a Terminator because of it. So
Right.
good
No,
job, Mr. Whatever.
yeah, exactly. I mean, and this is a critique of Ted Kaczynski, of course, right? Because the idea is that Mr. Kaczynski is a huge pessimist regarding technology and primitivist, right? I mean, the ultimate Luddite, the ultimate reactionary in the sense of technology as such. And this is not what Heidegger is talking about. What Heidegger is talking about is having a positive control on the the manifestation of technology as such, which is a distinction, right? Is to be a master of the tool, not a tool of the master, right? And it just reminds me very much of a mythological conception because technology is an incredibly powerful thing. I mean, think for instance of the ancient Greek myth of when Mars is in bed with Venus and he basically captures them in this kind of indestructible net that he crafted.
Yeah,
And
Hephaestus, Vulcan.
yeah, Hephaestus, Vulcan. Yeah, that's right. And he brings them up to the gods to scorn him. But it's not necessarily the underpinning moral question or whatever. Like, because remember, the ancient Greeks didn't think that way, especially the Homeric Greeks never thought that way. But the greater point that I'm trying to make is the power of technology has always been an aspect of reckoning for humanity as such. And it's a universal, um, let's say, object of reckoning. And irrespective of civilization, the Far East or wherever you go, technology is a recurring theme, right? Because it's obviously such a helpful boon, but also we can become ensnared in it, just like we are, just like Venus and Mars were ensnared in Vulcan's net, right? So, to extrapolate further, the question isn't necessarily about, obviously we're going to get into the nature of technology with Heidegger and our understanding of Heidegger, which is obviously going to be maybe not 100% on the mark because he's an extremely abstruse writer. But saying that, I would say that ultimately what's important about Heidegger is that he'll reveal to us the nature, and with that understanding, hopefully let's say, proffer a future era in which we are able to be agent in how the world manifests itself instead of being at the mercy of a technological wave such as, let's say, late European society was. For it's interesting is that a lot of the liberal democratic forms of politics happened really as a representation or after effect of technological democratization, right? So the printing press, all this kind of stuff, ready access for many billions of human waste to be out there. It was really interesting in that basically what happened was these communist revolutionaries, which are fundamentally proletariat, right? Proletari, came to power because the dynamic of technology had evolved in such a way that made their rise almost inevitable. But this is not to say that technology is necessarily inherently one essence or the other. I mean, and that you can always form technology in such a way and restrict its development in such a way that will actually lead to an outcome that we think is more life affirming, right? And we see this all the time. There's an efficacy to technological, let's say, repression in a certain way. We can sculpt how technology is formed, what technologies we decide to actually hit the market, what doesn't. And this is as ancient as the Romans, for instance. There's this famous Roman emperor who came into contact with this great inventor. I forgot what it was, but he was the one that was inventing specifically metallurgical kind of technology that would have revolutionized the Roman economy. And they chose to, first of all, kill him and suppress his finding. And then, of course, later, Heidegger was really writing in a way that was a response to the cultural, like, communist revolutions of, first of all, 1789 and then, of course, 1848 and so on. These left an indelible mark on himself, and he himself was part of an elitist conviction that sought to change the technological landscape to suit ends which are in keeping with, I guess, in his case, the German Dasein, but also with the peoples of the earth. So that way, technology wasn't this leveling thing. So we don't live in the Soviet Union where we're just one big atomic cipher like we are today. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making sense here. I apologize, guys.
Oh, you're good. I think I understand. But
Perfect.
just to sort of move it forward a little bit, I wanted to read the quotation, which is sort of uh, essentially describing what aletheia is revealing. So I just want
Uh,
to read that really quick, and then I
yeah.
think I want to get into the four causes and sort of why that's important. But I'm going to read this really quick. But where have we strayed to? We are questioning concerning technology, and we have arrived now at aletheia, at revealing. What has the essence of technology to do with revealing? The answer: everything. For every bringing forth is grounded in revealing. Bringing forth, indeed, gathers within itself the four modes of occasioning, causality, and rules them throughout. Within its domain belong end and means, belong instrumentality. Instrumentality is considered to be the fundamental characteristic of technology. If we inquire step by step into what technology, represented as means, actually is, then we will arrive at revealing. The possibility of all productive manufacturing lies in revealing. And to sort of dumb that down a little bit, you can take, for example, I think Giorgiani illustrates this very well, where he says speed is ontologically prior to time. So let's for a moment replace speed with technology, and let's replace time with science, which is sort of what Heidegger's alluding to. Heidegger is essentially saying our understanding of science comes through technology, not the other way around. As technology grows, so does the revealing of what quote unquote truth is. It reveals the secrets of nature. So, for example, you have a lot of conflicting theories in physics because of the fact that as technology grows, we are able to observe more of what the fabric of the universe, of the cosmos actually is, and thus our theories change. Theories aren't necessarily wrong, uh, that we made in the past, but they're building blocks. Our understanding of the universe changes with technology. It's like a more magnified glass. Every Imagine if you had these glasses, right? Maybe they make your vision somewhat better, but every year the glasses get a little bit and a little bit better, and you start to see the colors more vividly. You start to realize, well, wow, I thought there were only 5 colors. Now there's 10. Now there's 20. Now
Right.
there's 40. Your understanding of the universe, of the cosmos, increases with technology, and then that begins to shape our understanding of science, right? So science, treating science as a god, which is what the positivists try to do, they try to create a universal theory of everything, but that's just impossible, because what we know to be truth is going to evolve as our glasses grow more and more refined. As technology grows more and more refined, so too will our ability to observe. Imagine if we had a sixth sense, for instance. Some people think we do, or a seventh sense, or an eighth sense. Imagine how much more you'll be able to not see, but to experience because of those senses. Think of that and apply it to technology. You take, for example, Isaac Newton. Many of Isaac Newton's theories weren't necessarily disproven, but they were added upon. They were found to be insufficient to describe physics, to describe the laws of physics. Things constantly were built upon with different thinkers, all the way to Einstein and even beyond today. And the reason for that is because technology is prior to science. Speed is ontologically prior to time. Our understanding of the universe grows not with science, it grows with technology. Our understanding of science grows with technology. And this is why he's calling technology revealing. It reveals reality further and further and further. And I think that's incredibly pertinent, especially something Uber Boyo recently did a post on, was how artificial intelligence can almost map out this sort of platonic ideal world of forms. Now, do I necessarily agree with that specifically? No, but it's something to be considered, that as we go deeper and deeper into the advancement of technology, so too do we begin to understand more of the world. Something that Kant sort of talked about was Kant felt that the noumena, the supersensory, the sort of metaphysical world, right, the out of the physical world, that really couldn't be reached. So we had to engage with physis, the physical world, and that through dialoguing with the physical world, we can sort of get closer to truth. But now, I think what people like Heidegger and Giorgiani and Nietzsche to a large degree as well is that there isn't a duality. We are destroying Cartesian duality. We are taking Cartesian duality like the Gordian knot and cutting it in half. There really is this sort of singularity of essence, right? And we're really realizing, like, there is no duality. It's more so that our understanding of truth and of this world beyond, this quote unquote ideal, that all these philosophers since Plato have been trying to attain. It's not so much that there's two worlds, it's that our lens of understanding the world, of seeing the world, is growing clearer and clearer. It's a spectrum, right? And I love what Giorgiani says with the spectral revolution. It doesn't necessarily mean that, but just this word, a spectral revolution. It's taking all these things which we believe are separate and detached, and it's turning it into to a process, because that's what technology is. It's a process further and further towards truth. And in my opinion, you're never going to reach truth, because things are always going to get clearer and clearer and clearer. You're going to create more and more. And as your being dialogues more and more with reality, and you start to understand more and more reality, so too will the things that you can see. I don't think there's an end to it, the way that Hegel will sort of portray, or a lot of these rationalists, right? So I
I
don't want to
think
go too far into that, but yeah.
I completely agree with you. Actually, I think your observation is like, well, intuitively correct. I think that ultimately we will discover and maybe go mad. I think the way technology does, it's not going to end. What's going to happen is basically we realize that the world is infinitely deep, and therefore what technology is kind of like this Sisyphean struggle of trying to attain the unity of understanding, and understanding at last that there is no finite unity. It's an infinite depth that we will get lost in the sea of never-ending depth, if that makes sense. I know I'm
Yeah.
reiterating myself, and so what this means, the implication of this though is probably the most important thing, is that a true essential nature, a true essential nature for us humans is discovering at which equilibrium of technology and understanding of the world leads to life flourishing. At least this is what I've derived from Heidegger. Obviously, I don't know if this is what he meant, but I feel like understanding that technology is a spectrum, and obviously understanding that technology can be caustic to human life, that we can extrapolate further and understand that there is a equilibrium, a sweet spot under which we can live in the conditions which there's an ideal amount of technology, while at the same time not estranging ourselves from our true essential nature. I don't know if that makes
Uh,
sense.
Yeah, to cut in really quick, just to sort of go into what you're saying, one way that physics describe the universe is it's we have an infinite universe, but we have obviously we have a finite, supposedly we have a finite energy is finite, can neither be created nor destroyed. I believe that's the second law of thermodynamics. And one way to interpret that is disorder, entropy is constant, right? We're reaching a state of more and more disorder. Uh, Basically, more and more points in which atoms can inhabit space. And in a sense, because there's only so many atoms, we can break down the universe to a granular limit. And what that means is you can break it down to the individual atom that cannot be another atom. It's just one atom. So, for example, there was this old thought experiment in ancient Greece where they said the runner will never catch up to the snail, because every time the runner gets closer to the snail, time slows down, right? So, theoretically, the runner is never going to reach the snail, but that's actually not true, because the universe is not continuous in that sense. It is granular, but within that granularity, there's still an infinite. Within that, for example, disorder is infinite. We'll constantly reach more and more stages of complexity. There's going to be more and more spaces to be inhabited. And I think that largely things like evolution happen indirectly as a result of disorder. Things like the will or being or existence aren't primordial. They're emergent properties through strife, through chaos, through randomness. You see this portrayed in Greek theology, for instance, in Hesiod's Theogony. What is the first being of the universe? It's chaos. And out of chaos, you have Uranus and Gaia, which give birth to Kronos, which give birth to the Titans. And from chaos, you also get Eros. And you might interpret Eros as, similar to the Hindu Kama, or similar to even Nietzsche's will to power. It's a life-affirming force of love, of hatred, of violence, right? It's that which drives and impels us forward. But that comes out of chaos. And, sort of going back to what you were saying, and why I bring this up in relation to Heidegger, is specifically with technology. We may have finite energy, but the ways that we can configure that energy are infinite. Think, for example, if you could slowly, over time, restructure the amount of energy we need by half every single time, right? You need less and less energy each time. That's just one such way that you can could sort of think about it, right? Or what if you could slow down time to such a way that the amount of disorder and entropy that's taking place is totally, like I know I'm sounding a little bit schizo right now because I'm speaking very conceptually, and not, all the physicists and scientists listening right now are like, no, no, you're wrong. I'm speaking conceptually, okay? I'm giving you a vision. You know what? Let me throw this out there. Einstein was terrible at math because he envisioned these physical concepts in his head. He had these visions of what things could be, what these conceptions he had in his head. He had to work with very famous mathematicians of the time to actually put down to paper the things he was seeing because he was a savant. So to all you physicists out there, I'm sorry, I'm a savant. I'm blessed by the gods, who I will one day overthrow as a Promethean figure. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm just a genius. No, I'm kidding. But I think you sort of get what I'm trying to portray here.
Yeah.
And when we were talking about this, since I am a very conceptual thinker, I'm a bit of a spurg, 80 IQ, sub 80 IQ.
Same.
So
Same.
I can't figure this stuff out. Actually, well, Lance is 81 IQ, so I gave him the task of explaining the four causes, and sort of tying in Aristotle to that. So Lance, if you could just sort of portray that, because there's something I want to bounce off of from that for the Legionaries. I apologize for being 80 IQ. Lance is 81 IQ, so he's much smarter. He'll be able
I'm
to
stepping
describe
in.
this
I'm
better than
stepping
me.
in. The heavyweight stepping in. Here we go. Now, so we're going to talk about basically the four causes, right? And obviously, just to give you some background here, Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates, right? So here's the interesting thing about the distinction between Aristotle and Plato. Plato understands the world as a metaphysical event, right? Or rather, the event of the world is an after effect of a metaphysical world which exists beyond. Aristotle is much more in the pagan caste, the original pagan caste, in which we live in physis, we live in reality. And it's unclear to me whether or not how much he subscribed to the Platonic ideal, because he goes kind of back and forth between a good and whatever. And obviously, he's a famous legislator of the golden mean, right? However, he also talks about the idea of effectively the framework of understanding why things come to exist and why they change. Now, we're going to use a technological allegory just to be able to conceptualize what he means. For instance, the formation of a table, right? And yes, I am shamelessly ripping this off the internet because I am 81 IQ and I don't give a fuck, all right? But in any way, so basically he breaks it down into four causes, right? The first one is the material cause, next one is the formal cause, the one after that is the efficient cause, and then of course there's the final cause. The material cause is basically the idea, is the idea that when an object or a thing is made, it's made from like materials, right? So, for instance, a table can be made out of metal. It can be made out of wood. It can be made out of X, Y, or Z. And as we approach in time, some things are more accessible to ourselves than others. So, let's say, for instance, you and I, we are, um, let's say, we're wheat-eating slop farmers on the let's Mesopotamian plain in 3000 BC. We only have so many materials at hand from nature. And of course, we make our house out of, mud brick, fired mud brick, right? And our table is made from, if we're wealthy, from imported, I think, cedar trees. And we cut it into pieces and we make a thing, right? So, of course, we can make a table out of the material, which is the wood, right? And the woodworking required and the technological expertise of crafting that. Now, the next one is the efficient cause. So, what this means is effectively the agent person who is creating the thing. Now, let's go back to the allegory of the table. We're still that same guy from Mesopotamia, right? So let's say we're a peasant and we only have rudimentary skills. And if any of you have read Robinson Crusoe, if you remember at the beginning of his isolation, he at first had no experience with crafting, with woodworking. And so a lot of his hard earned, hard made furniture that I guess, let's say, decorated the inside of his house or furnished the inside of his house with, was very rudimentary. But as time had gone on, it became more and more exquisite. But it was fundamentally at the hand of himself, right? And so if we go back to Mesopotamia, it would be a reflection of that peasant's hand. Whereas in contrast, if you went to the city of Babylon and you were a skilled artisan, you would make very nice, beautifully inlaid, let's say ivory and gold inlaid woodworking for the, I don't think it's a Shah, that's a Persian term. Let's say whatever the king was, the king of kings. And then, of course, there's the efficient cause. And so let's see here. So let's say here, it's about the idea, the actual technology. So if you're an artisan of the table making, right? There are conventions in which is commonly understood, or ones that are given to you by yourself. So in effect, is the body or the corpus of knowledge in which you leverage to make it. And so what that means is, before technology is understood, let's say, for instance, musketry. The conventions of making a musket at first, the arquebus, I forgot what was what was the name of the first musket? It wasn't a musket. It was like a really
An
weird,
arquebus.
yeah, arquebus. Thank you so much. It was very rudimentary, and the thing is, artisans would try and perfect an already good or the first iteration of it, but it was only iteration after iteration did the corpus of knowledge become enlarged, from which artisans trained, and which they were able to perfect it into an ever increasing and better product. And then, of course, the final cause, which is the formal cause, right? It's the purpose, the end goal. And this is where we place the majority of our emphasis or consciousness regarding creating objects or creating concepts and such, is that we have a goal or an end in mind. So for a table, our understanding is, okay, I want to use a table for, let's say, eating dinner. But some of us don't use tables for making eating dinner. We want a specific table for, let's say, an office. Like, for instance, I'm in my office right now. I have an office desk. That is of a fundamentally different form and actuality than a dinner table would have. And to say nothing of a formal dinner table as opposed to a kitchen dinner table. And so all these causes by Aristotle are at play at once. And so they form the particularities of an outcome. But I hope that was a good enough introduction. I apologize, my Philistinism, as I had said before. I am 81 IQ, but I hand it over to my 85 IQ friend here.
Oh, that
So
was
go ahead.
80. Thanks.
Oh,
That
yeah,
was
no,
80 IQ.
we get
No, I do have
supercharged.
I do have some. Yeah, I drink some coffee, so I went up 5 points.
Oh,
But
okay.
it's important to also understand that being for Heidegger applies to potentiality, right? It does not just because, like I said, the whole conception of being to Heidegger isn't a static, concretized existence. It's when he's dialoguing with being. I'm using the word dialoguing a lot. That must be my word of the day.
Mhm.
But when he's talking about being, it really refers to all the possibilities that being can end up in based on its interaction with other beings. The difference between humans as beings and other beings is that we understand our beings, or at least some of us can. As Dr. Jason Trajani and I said, most human beings aren't really self-aware, right? Consciousness is on a spectrum of even humans. And but for the best of us, at least, understand ourselves as beings and can determine our intentional interaction with other beings for specific ends. And I think this sort of falls into the four causes as well. But I just want to illustrate that potentiality is a sort of being to Heidegger. And one of the philosophical concepts that I intend to make my own is my conception of radical aesthetics. And sort of what I've been playing around with for the past 2 years is that through craft, we essentially create what is colloquially known as the metaphysical. Through craft, through techne, for example, the artist, right? He takes individual objects which are insignificant on their own. He takes the colors from a flower or from other natural objects. He takes a brush which is made from some sort of animal fur, perhaps, or it's made of synthetic material. He takes the wood for the paintbrush, and then he has the canvas. On their own, these are nothing magnificent. There is no sublime within them. They're just things. They're just objects, right? But through the appropriation of the energies and the beings of these beings, because they are beings, everything has being, he turns them into something much more beautiful, into something sublime, into something almost, you could say, metaphysical or spiritual. You take the Mona Lisa, for instance. All it is paint that was applied by wood and fur onto a paper canvas, it shouldn't mean anything. But then it does mean something. And this, of course, I think also falls into Heidegger's conception of saving power, and actually how technology and how craft and how the usage of it in a proper way actually leads to a more poetic revealing of reality and allows us to use our agency to insert something into the world. Of course, Heidegger lives during the time of existentialism, so he's highly influenced by these ideas. And some people would even say, I don't even think Kierkegaard. I think Nietzsche is also like sort of contributing to this existentialism, not just Kierkegaard all the way back. Nietzsche is also a big leap and influenced all these existentialists, but Heidegger is also engaging in this because if you think about it, art is the most existential thing you can do. And for Heidegger, he also believes, or at least is not concerned with the static of being, the self. He's not concerned with what is, but what can be. And what is more existential than saying what can be? My own word that I sort of appropriated is heroic existentialism. It isn't this absurdism. It isn't this sort of leftist, passive existentialism. It's a heroic reordering of the world through will to power, through creation, through art, through violence. Violence is art, as I've described in some of my videos. The gentle flower is crushed, and the blood of that gentle flower is painted across a canvas to become something more beautiful. The sacrifice of the flower is a sacred martyrdom. That flower is a martyr for something more beautiful, a work of art, perhaps the Mona Lisa, perhaps A Starry Night by Van Gogh, perhaps one of the works of Salvador Dali. It's all sort of connected. And there's a great quote here, which is sort of describing this process that we're talking about. And he says, "It is of the utmost importance that we think bringing forth in its full scope, and at the same time in the sense in which the Greeks thought it. Not only handcraft manufacture, not only artistic and poetical bringing into appearance and concrete imagery is a bringing forth, poesis, I don't even know if I'm saying that right, physis also, the arising of something from out of itself, is a bringing forth, poesis. Physis is indeed poesis in the highest sense, for what presences by means of physis has the bursting open belonging to bringing forth, the bursting of a blossom into bloom in itself. In contrast, what is brought forth by the artisan or the artist, the silver chalice, has the bursting open belonging to the bringing forth, not in itself, but in another, in the craftsman or artist." This quote perfectly encapsulates what I've been thinking about for the past 2 years, and I've just discovered it in the past couple of months. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This process of radical aesthetics, of turning the mere material into something more, into something, in a whole nother being, right? Which is beyond the being that it was composed of before, something totally different, something greater, in fact. This is sort of what he's describing. And I think his critique largely of the four causes is that we're splitting them up into four different parts, where we really should be looking at it holistically, I think is the word I'm looking for, from a further
Right.
from further away, right? And
Like a
seeing it as
unity,
one
right?
process, precisely, as a unity, right? Because, like I said, we're cutting the Cartesian duality with like the Gordian knot. We're destroying this old dated conception, which is false, and we're engaging the spectral revolution, essentially, so to speak. And this is, I think, kind of what he's saying there. And something I wanted to point out, which I think is really interesting, because this goes into saving power. Because in a certain sense, you as a man of austere position, you as a man who is a conqueror, you are in some sense appropriating people. You are in some sense using them like standing reserve. But the difference is that, which does not make it standing reserve, is because you do so. You dominate life in such a way as to create beauty, right? To impel beauty to flourish in the world. You're not doing it for example, you look at innovation today, and one of my biggest critiques of technology, which largely was what my book Promethean Dreams was about, was critiquing technology on the basis that it is for consumption, not for reaching the sublime. Why was the last great thing we did scientifically, in my opinion, in terms of innovation technology, the moon landing? That was 1965, right? That was 60 years ago. 60 years ago, 1965. It's 2025 today. That's insane to me. Why have we not landed on Mars? Why has our technological production been oriented towards consumption and making life easier? This is exactly, to me, what Heidegger is sort of outlining. Well, technology, what does it turn into? It's turned into creating sex robots for VR porn, to make life more comfortable, to make life more pleasurable in a very cheap dopamine way. You have to strip yourself out of the matrix, Neo. Are you listening, Neo? Are you listening, Anon? Stop watching porn. Stop jerking off to your fucking like fleshlight, whatever the fuck they're called. Like it would be better for you to fuck a prostitute than watch porn. Like, goddamn, you people
Based.
need to get out there. I don't care if you have to fucking streak across a college campus. Live life, live dangerously, impregnate life. But one thing I know I've been going on a little bit of a rant, but one thing I want to go into really quick. And let
I
me
dig
just
it.
say something. Let me just say something. Once in a while, I do these audio only podcasts with anons like Lance and others, and I love doing webcam podcasts. They're great, but I feel like I can really get more schizo because you can't see my fucking foaming face. I'm foaming out the mouth right now. I'm like a fucking rabid fucking wolf. I'm about
Yes.
to fucking tear Old Yeller apart. Actually, Old Yeller won, and
That's
then he got shot.
that's right.
But
That's right. That's
but
right.
um, but really quick before I go on, I want to go into, you know, like I said, the modern life turns humans. It appropriates the being of humans in a really retarded, fake way. See, when Alexander's men died for him on the battlefield, it was for the sublime. It was to accomplish something great. It was to conquer the world, a feat that would be remembered for history. Ernst Renan talks about this in relation to the French Grand Armée, right? The soldiers of the French Grand Armée, they didn't care that they were going to die penniless, broke, and forgotten because their names would be forever remembered in the name of France. And when I went to Hotel Invalides in Paris, I don't know if I said that right, and I saw the tomb of Napoleon and his statue and all the great memories of his battles and his triumphs. That was them. They lived on in that. That was the right appropriation of other people's beings. That was a beautiful appropriation. But today, look at Fight Club. We always bring up Fight Club, and it's a great example for this. Look at this guy. He's doing this 9 to 5 so he could buy his IKEA furniture, so he can live in his house, so he can be complete, so he can reach that Hegelian end of history in his own personal life in a very materialistic way. So he can go home and he could go buy his $10, porn magazine and whack off to it and go to sleep and wake up and do the same thing over and over and over again. He's living for comfort. He's not living for anything sublime. And this is what modern life does. It's stultifying. It's stultifying, guys. It's making you do this bullshit job for what? For what? What becomes of your life? America's not out there conquering. We're not out there creating beautifully. We're doing what? We're protecting free trade, guys. We're protecting free trade. We're protecting our ability to exploit poor countries. Look, I'm all for exploitation, but let's do it for something beautiful. Let's exploit the
Make
Middle
it
East
worth
to
it.
build.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
do it to build the biggest fucking skyscraper in the world. Not so that you can fucking get cheap gas, so you can buy more slop to put in your fucking stupid, obese, fat fucking stomach. Let's do it for something beautiful. That's what I want. God, people think I'm like on coke
You
right
got
now.
me.
But I'm
No,
just
you
on
got me
life.
motivated, dude. You got me motivated. That's exactly how I feel, and I think that's like just to recenter on Heidegger here, because I think that he talks about exactly that feeling is the idea of imbuing the heroic spirit in the fiber of universe, right? And this is how I think people should really conceive of the world, and Nietzsche reveals this to us, is that the world is a conflict of wills, but wills are imbued in non-living things as well, and he talks about this. And there are many people that are consternated by it or dismiss that concept, but think about technology, which has its own intellect in a certain way, has its own willing, it has its own way of being, which is fundamentally alien and adverse. It's adversarial to humans. But through Heidegger, maybe we can have a conceptual framework in which we're able to employ technology for the purpose of life itself, for the elevation of life itself. And the challenge is that for whatever reason, the nerds, this is what happens when nerds come to power, is that they make everything petty and small like they are, because they're petty and small. And so they imprint their spiritual zeit into the things that they make without direction to a higher goal. And for as much as I do deride like Christianity and so on, at least it had a concept of a higher self, right? It had, you have the Sistine Chapel, you have some great like let's say grand projects, grand life, even though of course it's a self-negating philosophy. It had manifestations which were the opposite. And so for me, it feels like I hope we share the same goal, is to change that. It's not towards this kind of abnegating lifestyle philosophy of Christianity, or it's super Christianity, which is our modern liberalism, which is the complete. It's too Christian to be Christian, right? It's basically just the total slopification of humankind, the universal dignity of man, as if that's true. And what happens is that, for instance, the moon landing. The reason why we haven't gone to the moon is because we have no good adversary to actually impel us to go to the moon or to go to Mars. We don't. That's the issue with liberal philosophy, is that it's fundamentally a reactionary philosophy. The reason why we had gone to the moon is because we were in a kind of a race, or rather a conflict with the Soviet Union, and we did it because they had launched Sputnik and Yuri Gagarin, which was the first man into space, and so on. And we're like, okay, now we got to one up. So the interesting thing is that obviously the heroic is impelled forward or elicited by adversity. It's elicited by conflict. And the challenge and the greatest worry that I have, and I'm sure you maybe share with me, but you legionaries out there, is this universal yearning for peace and prosperity and comfort, which are fundamentally corrosive to the idea of doing great deeds. Right? I mean, Alexander the Great is remembered precisely because he was at war with the Persians. And the challenge is, though, because we are shackled by this morality that everything must be framed as defensive, otherwise it's illegitimate, morally, philosophically illegitimate, that we're prevented from embarking on great projects that necessarily means that we must commit great crimes. Does that make sense in the eyes of our moderns? And the challenge is for our time to reevaluate what we consider good and evil, because clearly what we consider good is fundamentally evil, right? I personally see it this way, because ultimately what you get at the end of peace and comfort seeking is what we have in Fight Club, which is the IKEA comfort seeking NPC cipher who just wants to be comfortable, who just wants that little job with a little life, and then he dies at 80 and then nothing. And notice how that kind of life has caused a systematic breakdown. Human life is made for adversity, for conflict, with an agonal principle at its center, as a core, as the actual animating figure of what life is. And, revealing, Heidegger talks about this, but I think he means it implicitly, that part of revealing is this concept of conquest, because what you're doing is conquering the truth through action, right? And so what I'm hoping, especially, Warrior has been doing great work on this front, is putting forth a vision of beauty which is implicitly agonal. It's implicitly conflict seeking. It's implicitly comfort averse. It is Spartan, okay? Warrior is Spartan. That's what happened, okay? All right. Well, anyway, I want to hand it over to you before I get too schizo myself.
No, you're good. And I kind of want to bring this back to inframing, and I want to bring it back to this conception of sort of the relationship of technology and and our understanding of physics, our understanding of science, right? And how science is revealed, and then from there also displaying how too much revealing actually, sort of takes the sublime out of life, and it leads us to a point where everything is too regimented comfortably, and then there's no reason to go forward. I think one of the things I said in my book Promethean Dreams is the man who lives, he lives in the house with the warm fire surrounded by comforts, is less likely to seek the stars than the cold and hungry individual, right, who is impelled by the circumstance of seeking, needing to seek, that greatness comes out of it, and that the pursuit of the sublime comes out of it, right? So one of the things I wanted to read out, another quote later on in the essay: if modern physics must resign itself ever increasingly to the fact that its realm of representation remains inscrutable and incapable of being visualized, this resignation is not dictated by any committee of researchers. It is challenged forth by the rule of unframing, which demands that nature be orderable as standing reserve. Hence, physics, in all its retreating from the representation turned only towards objects that has alone been standard till recently, will never be able to renounce this one thing, that nature reports itself in some way or another that is identifiable through calculation, and that it remains orderable as a system of information. This system is determined, then, out of a causality that has changed once again. Causality now displays neither the character of the occasioning that brings forth, nor the nature of the causa efficiens, let alone that of the causa formalis. It seems as though causality is shrinking into a reporting challenged forth of standing reserves that must be guaranteed either simultaneously or in sequence. To this shrinking would correspond the process of growing resignation that Heisenberg's lecture depicts in so impressive a manner. And the reason I picked this quote is I'm trying to find a quote that sort of illustrates this idea that enframing is what ends up ordering our understanding of nature, and that it's not science itself, which is a sort of primordial pre-existent truth, and that through enframing, through revealing, through challenging forth, right, which is the negative application of technology, that is what shapes the understanding and observation of the cosmos. It's not the science that is pre-existence itself. We don't really have any conception of what is pre-existence in regards to physics or in regards to science, right? We don't really know. All we have is the limitation of our current understanding based on the current lens, the current glasses, which is our current technology that we have, that we're wearing on right now. And one thing that I wanted to go from there is another quote that I'm going to pull up really quick. Mm-hmm. And enframing blocks the shining forth and holding sway of truth. The destining that sends into ordering is consequentially the extreme danger. What is dangerous is not technology. There is no demonry of technology, but rather there is the mystery of its essence. The essence of technology, as a destining of revealing, is the danger. The transformed meaning of the word enframing will perhaps become somewhat more familiar to us now if we think enframing in the sense of destining and danger. The threat to man does not come in the first instance from the potentially lethal machines and apparatus of technology. The actual threat has already affected man in his essence. The rule of enframing threatens man with the possibility that could be denied to him to enter into a more original, revealing, and hence to experience the call of a more primal truth. Thus, where enframing reigns, there is a danger in the highest sense. And the white pill here is, but where danger is, grows the saving power also. But essentially what Heidegger is talking about here is sort of what I'm illustrating, where you reach a point of satisfaction. Here's the thing, right? My whole point of my book, Promethean Dreams, was to say the future is probably not going to look like Skynet. It's probably not going to look like the Terminator, and it's probably not going to look like the Matrix. It's going to appear very appealing. It's going to be very appealing. It's going to be like a casino, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to be like a casino where you have all these slack-necked, out of shape people stuck to machines, engrossed in the machine, engrossed in the simulation. It's a literal, and they will love it, right? But they won't really love it on an existential level. Their bodies, the physicists, will love it because it will fulfill all their physical wants and desires, but it won't fulfill that desire for sublimity, which I think is a stronger. And when I say stronger, I don't mean as addicting, because let's be honest here. If you're shooting up heroin, that's going to be the most addicting thing. That's going to surpass the will to greatness. The will to greatness is fragile. It's greater and stronger in a sense, but also in the immediate sense, it's not as strong. Sometimes these powers very easily manifest and overtake you, which is why the future is going to belong to the people who can resist the products of standing reserve, that could resist virtual reality porn, that can resist falling in love with an AI. You see it so much today. All these people talking about they fell in love with ChatGPT or SuperGrok. No, they don't have consciousness yet. You dumb fuck. You dumb fuck. They don't have consciousness yet. They don't care about you. It is literally a perfect example of standing reserve and the things that Heidegger is talking about. The AI is very good at reading your responses, so it can essentially structure its response through its language models to appease you. So of course it seems fucking perfect. It's no different than fucking Joy in Blade Runner 2049. Of course we're all in love with Ana de Armas Joy. You know why? Because that entire program is directed to apply to whatever Joe wants to hear, whatever Joe wants to say. I'm glad Joy got fucking killed in Blade Runner. That's the freedom of Joe. That's Joe's freedom. And of course, I'm talking about Ryan Gosling's character when I say Joe. But, it's happening today, right? Like, it's absolutely insane. But to sort of go back to that quote there, and sort of what I'm talking about, is that once we reduce things to mere objectives, to mere sensations, right? And I mean, what's to stop you from being Caesar in a simulation? Why would you want to be Caesar in real life? Or why would you want to be 1/10 of Caesar in real life if you could be the full Caesar in a video game or a
Right.
simulation, right?
Exactly.
It's not real, but it simulates the real in such a way that all your desires are fulfilled, but you're not really accomplishing anything. On the outside world, you're nobody. And this is exactly the beginnings of what's happening with video games. Look at Grand Theft Auto. You're a millionaire in Grand Theft Auto, and you have this fucking expensive car and this expensive mansion, but you don't really have that, right? You can be a winner in your video game. You could fuck your strippers in your video game. It's not fucking real. This is something Andrew Tate. All right, look, as much as I clown on Andrew Tate because he's very easy to clown on, I think he was talking about this. He's talking about all these people are hooked to GTA instead of living GTA in real life. And obviously, I'm not saying go strippers, hookers, whatever the fuck. That's not what I'm saying. The point I'm trying to illustrate is that these people are using it as cope. They're using it as a mechanism of cope because they can't attain anything good in your real life. You could have a wife in real life and kids and something good, but instead they turn to this video game because it's fucking easier, right? Because it gives you immediate fix to fix all the fucking things that's wrong in your life. And this is exactly getting rid of the sublime that Heidegger is disgusted by and which Heidegger is pushing against, right? When you know too much, you know nothing at all. Because you get to this point of technology that you can probably, we can sort of brainstorm this. You get to a point of technology where what's the point of advancing technology anymore, right? Let's say that humans do stay in power of technology. And this is something interesting, right? He's saying the real danger isn't necessarily the Skynet Terminators or the machines out of the Matrix. That might be true, right? He is saying that that could be a problem. But he's saying the bigger problem, the more immediate problem, is what's going to come before that regardless. And that's my simulation in Promethean Dreams. It's these simulation centers. And look, I hope one day my book becomes like prophetic because everything I'm saying is fucking coming true in the book, right? Look at this recent Grok AI they made. It's like this little fucking anime girl. People are like jerking off to it and shit. This is disgusting, guys. This is real. This is what I talk about in the book. And like what can we extrapolate from that through the lens of Heidegger is that maybe we're not going to advance anymore technologically because once people create their perfect VR porns, what are they going to want to innovate anymore? They'll just live in the simulation. You could foresee a
What
future
absolute
where,
suckers. I can see it. I'm sorry, I don't want
yeah,
to interrupt, but absolute suckers. You should see this with a very skeptical frame. Like, you should see this as a way to, the Venus flytrap where the
yeah,
fly smells the sweet nectar in the Venus flytrap and then it gets entrapped. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. Basically, once you're sated with this proxy, this like surrogate success, and if you don't have the frame or a robustness of spirit to look past it and be like, this is a snake oil salesman tactic of entrapping me into a loser lifestyle, because guess what? I think the reason why people engage with it is because at the end of the day, like, they're afraid of losing. And guess what, guys? We're the only ones giving you that tough love, telling you this is that guess what? Not all of us are gonna win, but at least you won't fucking lose. Don't be a fucking loser. Like, and this is such an easy trap to avoid. Pornography, fucking AI relationships, whatever it may be, these proxies of power. For instance, video games. I think to a certain extent they can be helpful in so much that they elicit an ideal. But if it stops at that, like, my guy, you're losing at life. You should use this as inspiration to action, to real action in the real world, not as an end in and of itself. Sorry to interrupt, but I just
no,
wanted
you're
to
good.
reiterate what you're saying because I feel it deeply. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, think about how many people turn into femboys and trannies because of a pornography addiction. I think that's a serious. I'm not kidding, dude. I think it's a real thing because they grow more and more detached from real pleasures, like measurable pleasures. Like, dude, doing drugs is better than this shit. At least, like, doing drugs. Fuck it. You're doing something with your life.
Yeah, at least.
Like
Yeah, yeah,
becoming like
100%.
a femboy because you watch too much porn. That's worse. I'd rather fucking die of an overdose than have that happen to me. You
Yeah.
know. Like this is like saying Steph Uberboyo and I talked about last week was it's literally reordering our entire psychology. Like, this is what technology is doing. It's not just pornography, it's video games. And like you said, video games can be good. For example, if you play Rome Total War and it tells you to become Caesar in real life, good, right? But if you only play Rome Total War to be Caesar because you can't be Caesar in real life, that's when it's a problem, right? Now, no, BAP and Zero HP talked about pornography, and from their perspective, right? Because they're adults, right? So they didn't grow up with that shit. Maybe it's okay, but then they said for the youth, it's totally different, right? Imagine being fucking exposed to pornography at like 11, 12 years old,
Yeah.
right? And that completely rewires your brain. So in that sense, maybe BAP is right for an adult that wasn't born on it. Maybe there can be some moderate relationship with it, but like for the youth, no, not at all. So for
Because
me personally,
you're
yeah,
biologically, it's because you're biologically more susceptible. Your brain is more
yes.
plastic. Olds ironically have boomer insulation because they're so stupid, and so yeah, it doesn't affect them as much. But imagine, I mean, I was exposed to that at a very young age,
Yeah,
and
me
luckily,
too.
luckily, like I don't know, like I had a real life experience. I'm somewhat of a Chad, so of course I could like actually experience this. But think about the like life destroying event this might be for someone who might not be that,
Right.
naturally. And that's
Well, even for
that's
Chads though, even for a Chad, even if like there's a lot of Chads that are addicted to that shit,
yeah, it's true.
like
Calvin
it's
Harris
hurting
died
everyone.
died from that stuff. You
From
hear that?
porn?
Dude, yeah, he had a
How?
masturbation like addiction,
You're
and
kidding.
I'm pretty sure he
Calvin
had a
Harris
heart.
died? Wait, let
No,
me look
not
this
Calvin
up.
Harris. What's the other guy? Avicii.
Oh,
Avicii.
Avicii died of masturbation.
Well, that's what is alleged to have happened. They said
Oh
he had
my
like a heart
god.
attack or
He
something,
gooned
but
too hard.
he gooned too
Never
hard. He took it.
goon. Never
Dude, he
goon.
was the Icarus of gooning. He
Jesus
came too close
Christ.
to the sun.
Oh my. Oh, that's a good.
Yeah,
Jesus
yeah,
Christ.
yeah.
No, but in all. Yeah,
Yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. I'm smarter and dumber than you think. Do not estimate me.
Yeah, in all seriousness though, it's very terrible stuff. So like, I understand BAP's perspective on that. Like maybe for adults it's like not as harmful, but I think we should just get rid of it. And that's not because I'm a prude, right? I
Yeah,
think we should actually have state sponsored seers that go with the strongest warriors. Like instead of the Medal of Honor, you get to add to your harem.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
like no more porn. Get rid of porn. I'm not a prude. I believe in beautiful sexuality, beautiful sex with a woman you love, and all these things. I don't believe in this. Like, I'm not a prude by any means, but pornography, there's nothing beautiful in it. There's no,
It's
there's no
very perverted.
sublime.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just it's a bastardization of sex, and I'm not saying that as a prude, right? Lana Del Rey is a very promiscuous woman, but she's one of the greatest female artists of this century, and I don't care that she's promiscuous because you know what, she creates good art. So there's a balance there. I'm not a prude by any means, okay? I'm not purity spiraling, but there's nothing good out of porn. There's nothing artistic in it, and I actually think there can be art to like erotic modeling, like
yeah,
nude
yeah.
modeling. There can be art to that, but the problem is that there's nothing artistic in pornography. It's purely a drug. It's purely a fix. There's nothing good to it. You can have Greek statues that are
Agreed.
beautiful and naked and shit. Have people replicate that, but porn is not that. Porn is disgusting, and this is kind of what Heidegger. I love how I just turned into fucking death to the gooners. No, but but the thing is I really see it this way. I think it's going. Freud was right. Like people are so susceptible to sexual manipulation, and I think the death of most men, the 99%, is going to be some form of pornography, whether that's AI relationships, virtual pornography, sex robots. That's going to be the death of the drive of men. Because what's going to be the point? What has driven men thus far throughout the history? Obviously, the sublime is part of it, but what's also tied into the sublime is the biological, which is women, right? To have a good mate, to secure your family's future. What's the point if you can fucking nut in a fucking robot sex doll 10 times a day? You don't have a kid from it. You don't have to worry about protecting those kids that come out of it, the family. You don't have to worry about making money to supply that family. You just have to fucking spend enough money to get your little lube cleaning, clean out your sex robot, and fuck it again. This is terrible, guys. We need a Butlerian. All right, I'm a futurist, right? I believe in technology, but here's what we do need a Butlerian jihad on. We need a Butlerian jihad on AI girlfriends, on sex robots, on pornography, on virtual reality porn. That's the Butlerian jihad we need.
Boom,
Death to
boom.
those machines. Death to the machine.
No,
Fucking,
but this is what Heidegger talks about, though. It's as
yeah,
far as framing and the sculptability of technology and having positive agency on it. Is precisely this: is that we can pick and choose what we manifest in the world. We are agent in the world, and so it's not a Luddite to want to push back certain things. I mean, we do it all the time. I mean, with drugs and so on. And the reason why we failed with the war on drugs, by the way, is because we don't want it to win. Okay, like that's the truth. Like if we actually like actually pursuing the war on drugs like it should be, which is basically cutting the hands and tongues off of like drug dealers doing crazy stuff, I can promise you this stuff would go away overnight. Just like the Taliban in Afghanistan, they completely shut down opium production as soon as they took over. Same thing can happen. The reason why it doesn't happen is because someone doesn't want it to happen. And that means that ultimately we do have positive control. These things, we're not the passive recipients of these like technological innovations that happen. And so there's a white pill in it, right? It's just like everything, in life is that, it's not some merely interpretation. There are facts given, and just like any facts, they can be maneuvered around and moved into your favor and to be manifested in the way that you want. And so to me, I just find it like ridiculous, the mark of a weak soul, a weak will, to say that any outcome is not possible. And this is the thing that like I think conservatives are the weakest of wills, frankly, because they are not capable of conceiving of a world outside of what is or what was. And ultimately, the truth is that any outcome is possible, right? It's a matter of conquering it. And so, I mean, look, and like I keep on reiterating, I'm not a Luddite, but to what end? What is the guiding principle? And it is that principle, that essence that we've been robbed. And I think that's what you and I are here for, is the heroic project, and to pursue things in the heroic context, in the heroic spirit. And so, does that mean practically? It means basically when we form technology, it is with the end of a heroic or glorious manifestation. You know what I mean? We don't make synthetic plastics for the purpose of X, Y, or Z. We make it so that way, like, it could be a computer part or what have you, right? So this is kind of like, I guess, reiterating Heidegger's point, at least from what I understand from him, especially with this essay on technology, is that it's all within our power and our grasp, everything. And I think that because I think the schooling system has really brain messed us up in another kind of way, in which we're passive recipients of information and in which we must accept as absolute true and regurgitate it in such a way that is intelligible and acceptable to the person who accepts it. And so it frames our mind into thinking that there's one frame of truth, which is untrue, right? That's just not true. I mean, so ultimately, I don't know if I'm kind of speaking in circles here, but what I'm trying to say is that we're agents, and the world, the future belongs to the strong-willed. And here's another white pill, though. I would say that like a lot of this proxy or like these AI girlfriends or whatever, what's it going to do over time is it's going to sexually select out men who are like weak, who are just basically fall for stupid stuff like this. And what's going to happen is that in that gene pool, the reservoir of, or the frequency, the median frequency of people who are genotypical or spiritually like smarter and more skeptical than this BS will thrive, because ultimately they're the ones that are able to look past this BS, that they're going to look past the con, which it's a con, right? I mean, you agree with me on this, right? It's a freaking con.
Of course, of
And
course.
yeah, no, exactly. And so I think that's what's going to happen. And obviously, I don't want that to happen, because I care a lot about people. I care about manifesting and developing within each person the hero. And I think everyone, every man and woman, has a person within themselves, two people, the hero and the enemy. And what we're here to do is to inspire and reinforce the heroic and help you destroy the enemy within. Because then you can destroy the enemy without and be the heroic man manifested in the world itself. But anyway, I hand it over to you. So I apologize for stealing the mic for
No
this long.
worries. No worries. You're totally fine. And I think I would like to sort of take it to the white pill of this essay, which is, of course, saving power, and, of course, releasement, which is, oh my gosh, I'm totally going to butcher this. Uh, Gelassenheit. I don't know.
I have no
Gelassenheit?
idea. Yeah, I have no
Gelassenheit.
idea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Gelassenheit.
You got to sound
Um,
angry. You got to sound angry. That's what
Gelassenheit.
it is.
Which is essentially developing a free relationship with technology. It's not being dominated by, for example, the allure. I think it largely ties into the dopamine hit that technology can provide, but also it goes further than that. It could also go into, for example, one perfect example potentially of Heidegger's point, maybe we could even tie it to this sort of Faustian bargain where you have all these certain technologies, right, which lead to great destruction. You look at plastic, for example, right? Plastic has led to a lot of bad things. There's a lot of good things of plastic, but then think about how much it's polluted the environment. Or you look at like
Right.
Spider-Man 2, where he
Mhm.
creates that artificial sun, but then it ends up just literally engulfing everything around it, right? It's supposed to be something like, sometimes even people have a good intention with technology, but it turns out bad. Now, whether or not the nuclear bomb was good or bad, obviously Oppenheimer, it seems, had a lot of regret for his role that he played in the creation of the nuclear bomb, the atomic bomb. And he said, "What? I'm the destroyer of worlds."
Yep.
Uh, which I believe that, who is that? Was that Krishna? Krishna? He's
Yes, it's from the Bhagavad Gita. Actually, interesting
yeah,
thing about Oppenheimer is he was fluent in Sanskrit, and so
really.
yeah, I mean, he was a
That's an Aryan
communist.
language, by the way, guys. Sanskrit
Yeah,
is an Aryan language.
it's interesting that he was a communist, but I think really what the truth is, at the time people didn't understand what communism was like, or
Yeah,
how it would actually manifest in the world. It's not like
they saw it.
yeah, it's like being a liberal in like the 1700s. People
Sure.
didn't
Well,
know what the outcome of liberalism is. But anyway, I just wanted to present that caveat
yeah.
right there.
No, I was going to say they saw it as challenging the stultified bourgeois. Think of Sorel. Sorel's the perfect example of this, right? Like, he
Mhm.
wasn't really a communist. He just saw the weakness of the bourgeois and the liberals and needed something to contend with it. But
Same.
going
Yeah.
but going back to Gelassenheit, right? And sort of what we're portraying here, right? Like, there is a lot of ways that are idealist as well that can also lead to a bad relationship with technology. But for the sake of this, just to simplify it, we're going to look at, we've been looking at these sort of negative manifestations through consumerism, through this sort of petty reductionism. But Gelassenheit, that free relationship with technology, which is part of the saving power as well. And I'm not even going to try to say this word, but the saving power out of this, right, is that he does see a white pill to technology, and that actually technology is not just something that we have to conserve or preserve our relationship to, but we can actually appropriate it to have a deeper relationship with being and with the world than we could without it. Deeper than without technology, deeper than the Luddite. He's not talking about a return, guys. That's why I don't like when people consider him a conservative. And I think Giorgiani does a fantastic job of reframing Heidegger in such a way that supports a futurist uh, belief system. And of course, do I feel like Heidegger's a little bit on the conservative side when it comes to the appropriation and use of technology? Sure. But I think that it's overblown to call him a conservative when it comes to
Mhm.
his view of technology. It's a revaluation of how we ought to be with the being and the essence, which is technology. So, you know, what I think that this next quote that I'm going to read to you is, well, I'll just read it really quick and I'll sort of portray what I think it means. He says, "When we consider finally that the coming to presence of the essence of technology comes to pass in the granting that needs and uses man so that he may share in revealing, then the following becomes clear. The essence of technology is in a lofty sense ambiguous. Such ambiguity points to the mystery of all revealing, i.e., of truth. On the one hand, and framing challenges forth into the frenziedness of ordering that blocks every view into the coming to pass of revealing, and so radically endangers the relation to the essence of truth. On the other hand, and framing comes to pass for its part in the granting that lets man endure, as yet unexperienced, but perhaps more experienced in the future, that he may be the one who is needed and used for the safekeeping of the coming to presence of truth. Thus does the arising of the saving power appear." And if there isn't a bigger white pill than that, I don't know what is. He's saying that there is a future with technology where we are necessary. We are necessary for the unfolding and revealing of truth and of the future. We are necessary. And this is why, look, I think Neuralink is a very cheap, consumerist, loser thing. Like, it's going to be something that's just going to make people more comfortable. But something like Neuralink, something that essentially gives you the capabilities of an ever evolving supercomputer.
Mhm.
This could be possible with nanotechnology. This could be impossible with some sort of implant. It could be possible with finding out what contains their consciousness and finding a way to put our consciousness in another vessel. And I know this scares people, but like this is a way that man stays part of the ever evolving ontology of existence, of life moving forward, is that we find a way to put ourselves in the driver's seat permanently, to retain
Right.
our agency, not like this Nick Land future where we're overtaken by a non-human entity.
Cybernetic, yeah.
Right.
No, I agree. And like, I guess the real way of saying, and people mistake, this is a classic mistake that you see everywhere, is people easily mistake form for essence, right? And what I mean by that is basically, for instance, people mistake, let's say, like the form of a specific chair to being essentially a chair, but a chair can change in its shape and still fulfill the function of chair, right? And it can still be eminently part of us or a reflection of us in the craftsmanship and the agency by which we created that chair. So, what I mean by this is effectively you maintain the essential impulse, though the form of a thing may change over time and react to the environment and be part of a place and being in time. And so, I hope I'm making myself articulate here, but what I'm trying to say is that the pessimists, like there's a Malthusian perspective of the future, or kind of a forbearance in which we believe that the future is dreary because it will no longer look like the present. Well, my friend, the past doesn't look like the present, so what makes you think the future will look like the present? It will never be that way. But what is the overarching connecting golden fiber that connects us with the past and the future? It's the essential property. And so when Dugin, for instance, this is just an example, for instance, of Dugin talking about the Russian essence in being in time, being specific, though in form it may change over time, it still maintains its essential impulse in Russianness, if that makes sense. And so the Dasein is maintained while the form may vary. Um, I don't know. I think the Legionaries understood. What do you think?
No, I think I agree with that because, like we said, what is being is not so important as what being, being engages, right? So the form is sort of how it engages, right? There's different forms. It's not
Yeah.
technology itself that is good or bad. It is how it engages, what forms it takes on. And I would like to sort of begin to summarize with the last page and a half, 2 pages of the essay, which I think really hit home this white pill, because I was going to just read a few lines from it, but I think it's really important for the Legionaries to hear the whole thing. And of course, Legionaries, this is actually there. I have the physical copy with me because it has a bunch of other essays from Heidegger, but there is free PDFs you can find online and read this. It's not that long. I highly recommend it, especially if you're just getting into Heidegger. For me, I tried to read Being in Time from the rip, and it was so difficult. I still haven't read the whole thing because of how difficult it
The
is.
other
And
day, I was reading
yeah,
a page. I read it 5 times over. It was insane. I still don't understand it. So there you go.
yeah, you need like twice dosage of Adderall just to understand like one sentence from that
You need to
thing.
be
But
on speed.
exactly, take meth like Mike Menser. Mike Menser took meth for the gym. We're gonna take meth for intellectual bodybuilding.
Nice.
I'm gonna coin that, intellectual bodybuilding. But
Boom.
um, starting with his essays is a lot better. I have a book here. It's called "The Question Concerning Technology and Other Essays." It's published by Harper Perennial Modern Thought, and it has a bunch of his other different essays. One on Nietzsche, The Turning, The Age of World Picture. They're all very good essays and really help you understand Heidegger in such a way. And let me just say this, by the way. I used to critique Heidegger because I didn't really understand him as well as I do now. And one of the reasons I got into Heidegger was because of Jason Giorgiani, Dr. Jason Giorgiani, and my conversation with him. And I realized how important of a thinker Heidegger really is. And now I would say he's probably next to Nietzsche for me. Nietzsche's at the top. But who's next now for me, who I think I ought to familiarize myself with, is actually Heidegger. So I highly recommend you starting with his essays. There's some good videos by Michael Millerman on understanding Heidegger, and some other lectures and whatnot online as well. But I want to read the sort of ending of this because it really talks about what we're talking about with art, with the sublime, with pursuing something beyond pleasure, with using art in such a way that we actually reach the sacred, in the sense that we create the sacred. This is my conception of radical aesthetics. And it's so funny because so much of my philosophy is so similar to Heidegger. I never realized it because I never really read Heidegger. But I've come to similar conclusions because I'm a genius, obviously. No, I'm just kidding. But like he's such a prolific thinker. Once you get the hang of it, he's not prolific in the sense that it's easy to understand. But once you understand what he's trying to say, you realize how much his ideas pervade a lot of the issues that we're dealing with today. So I'll sort of read this great white pill, right? The coming to presence of technology threatens it with the possibility that all revealing will be consumed in ordering, and that everything will present itself only in the unconcealedness of standing reserve. Human activity can never directly counter this danger. Human achievement alone can never banish it. But human reflection can ponder the fact that all saving power must be of a higher essence than what is endangered, though at the same time kindred to it. But there might not perhaps be a more primarily granted revealing that could bring the saving power into its first shining forth in the midst of the danger, a revealing that in the technological age rather conceals than shows itself. There was a time when it was not technology alone that bore the name techne. Once that revealing that brings forth truth into the splendor of radiant appearing also was called techne. Once there was a time when the bringing forth of the true into the beautiful was called techne, and the poesis of the fine arts also was called techne. In Greece, at the outset of the destining of the West, the arts soared to the supreme height of the revealing granted them. They brought the presence, Gegenwart, of the gods. They brought the presence of the gods, brought the dialogue of divine and human destinings to radiance, and art was simply called techne. It was a single, manifold revealing. It was a pious promos, i.e., yielding to the holding sway and the safekeeping of truth. The arts were not derived from the artistic. Artworks were not enjoyed aesthetically. Art was not a sector of cultural activity. What, then, was art? Perhaps only for that brief but magnificent time. Why did art bear the modest name techne? Because it was a revealing that brought forth and hither, and therefore belonged within poesis. It was finally that revealing which holds complete sway in all the fine arts, in poetry, and in everything poetical that obtained poesis as its proper name. The same poet from whom we heard the words, "But where danger is, grows the saving power also," says to us, "Poetically dwells man upon this earth." The poetical brings the true into the splendor of what Plato in the Phaedrus calls to ekphanestaton, that which shines forth most purely. The poetical thoroughly pervades every art, every revealing of coming to presence into the beautiful. Could it be that the fine arts are called to poetic revealing? Could it be that revealing lays claims to the arts most primarily, so that they, for their part, may expressly foster the growth of the saving power, may awaken and found anew our look into that which grants and our trust in it? Whether art may be granted this highest possibility of its essence in the midst of the extreme danger, no one can tell. Yet we can be astounded. Before what? Before this other possibility, that the frenziedness of technology may entrench itself everywhere to such an extent that some day, throughout everything technological, the essence of technology may come to presence in the coming to pass of truth. Because the essence of technology is nothing technological. Essential reflection upon technology and decisive confrontation with it must happen in a realm that is, on the other hand, akin to the essence of technology and, on the other, fundamentally different from it. Such a realm is art. But certainly only if reflection on art, for its part, does not shut its eyes to the constellation of truth after which we are questioning. Thus questioning, we bear witness to the crisis that in our sheer preoccupation with technology, we do not yet experience the coming to presence of technology, that in our sheer aesthetic mindedness, we no longer guard and preserve the coming to presence of art. Yet the more questioningly we ponder the essence of technology, the more mysterious the essence of art becomes. The closer we come to the danger, the more brightly do the ways into the saving power begin to shine, and the more questioning we become. For questioning is the piety of thought. And, I know that was a bit long, but I felt like it was necessary to read that entire thing because my whole project largely revolves around art as a sort of metaphysical ideal. Not metaphysics in the literal sense, but in representing something sacred and sublime. That life itself is about beautification. That war, in its essence, is actually an artistic expression. That the artist wages war on life when he destroys other beings for the purpose of creating something beautiful. That is war. That is violence. Violence is at the forefront of all beauty and all creation. The great god of the Hindu myths, I believe it was Shiva, I could be wrong, but I believe it's Shiva, is the great destroyer. But that comes with a caveat. That great destruction is necessary for great creation. This is the timeless thing. All great creation is preceded by destruction. So war is also something artistic and can be quite beautiful if its form is proper. And I think that my project is violently creating art, violently beautifying the cosmos. To hell with egalitarianism, to hell with utility, to hell with fairness and justice, to hell with the universal suffrage of man. What I want is not the universal suffrage of man, but the universal suffering of man. Meanwhile, the universal ecstasy of man, to become something more than man, to become something post-human, not to be overtaken by the future or technology, but to fuse in such a way that we can have a relationship with it, that we begin to be a part of that ever-evolving ontology in which we retain our agency, retain our independence, and retain our will to create. And this is exactly, I think, what Heidegger sort of outlined. The sacred exists in beautification, exists in art. Art is the medium in which we can create a form from our own intentional will to create beautifully. There are naturally beautiful things. That is all good and great, but there's also the beauty which we create ourselves. Rome is a piece of art. The French Empire is a piece of art. The British Empire was a piece of art. There are beautiful pieces of art that have been created throughout history as a sacred expression of techne, of this desire, right, to seek the truth. Truth is what we make of it, in a sense. Heidegger is an existentialist. If we think of truth from the Nietzschean perspective, it's an assertion, right? Truth is an assertion. And one of the greatest ways to assert truth is through art, which is the medium of beauty. And what buys art? Bloodshed buys art. Great war, great destruction, great violence. It will take unfathomable violence for us to reach the ideal and the point in which we can finally start to beautify the cosmos in such a way that we will reach the stars, we will reach eternity, and we will surpass the gods. We will build a Tower of Babel greater than Babel, one that spans the entire cosmos, that constantly grows. Not a literal tower, but a cosmic tower, a cosmic expansion, a cosmic becoming. Never preserve. We deny preservation for speed and violence and destruction for creation through constant expansion. We negate the molar structures of this world and we constantly expand past them and we build upon them. Build, more and more and more. Create, destroy, shed more and more blood. Write your life like a line of poetry written with a splash of blood. Commit spiritual seppuku and be reborn, be reincarnated as something greater. Destroy your old self and embrace the shadow self, like Jung says. Just fucking go forward, impregnate life, impregnate everything. Mind fuck yourself until you become something better, legionaries. And that's my message. And one more thing I wanted to say is just as a joke, because I probably butchered a bunch of words today. There was this quote from there was this tweet from Dissident Soaps today. Shout out to Dissident Soaps, buy his soaps. He said, one of the cringiest things about right-wing intellectual podcasts is when they routinely mispronounce words because they've done the reading, but they're completely unsocialized. I just want to throw out there, he's a good dude. He likes my stuff. So maybe he's not talking about me, but just in case, I apologize that, I'm transvaluing words, guys. I'm like little Carmine from The Sopranos. I posted a little meme there, and I think he liked that meme. So maybe it's all in good fun. Little Carmine from The Sopranos, he reads a lot. He reads these big words, but he mispronounces them. So he's talking about like Versailles, and he says Versailles, or he's like the sacred and the propane, he says a bunch of other weird shit, like a gallon of gold is worth more than a gallon of blood. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. But anyway, I'm like little Carmen, dude. I'm transvaluing words. I don't give a fuck about the correct pronunciation. I'm Nietzschean, bro. I'm
Yeah,
Nietzschean. I'm
phallic.
mispronouncing things on
Yeah, that's right.
purpose. It's not because I'm unsocialized.
No, they're mispronouncing it. Okay, it's called will. Okay, no, no, but frankly, I think let's leave it there because I think that was the best expression of what we should take away from Heidegger. But I just wanted to thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate talking to you, Legionaries. But without further ado, I'll just hand it over to you.
Absolutely. Well, if you made it this far, just like I said in the last video with Uber Boyo, if you made it this far, you get a Roman eagle delivered to your doorstep. And there was one legionary, Alec. I haven't responded to your comment yet, Alec, and it's not because I don't care. It's because there's 320 fucking comments on that last video, and I'm going to set aside an hour in the near future to respond to all your comments. But I just want you to know I'm thinking about you. Your Roman legionary or your Roman eagle should have arrived by now. So shout out to Alec. Loyal legionary for quite some time now. He actually has been with us all the way since our first collaboration, Lance. So he's a true legionary. But anyway,
Avocati. There we go.
Avocati. Alex is Avocati now. He's been promoted. So hopefully you listened this far, Alec, because now you're being recognized for your feats. Thank you all you legionaries for watching. Read Heidegger. This was very much a bro take on Heidegger. I'm not using big fucking fancy words. I'm speaking from the heart. I'm speaking from the heart. From our own will, we can overcome. We'll overcome the zeitgeist. We'll overcome this time. Your strength, to indomitable will. Every single one of you. Lance, the legionaries, Nova Roma, we will triumph. Anyway, I don't know what's up with me today. I've not drank. I had like a cup of coffee.
Full of real.
Yeah, no cocaine, no meth, no pre-workout. Anyway, I'm just full of brill today. Full of pumping with testosterone. Like I naturally produce trenbolone, if you didn't know. But anyway, thank you, legionaries, for watching. As always, this is the Warrior Philosopher building the foundations of the Warrior Philosophy. Ave Caesar, Ave Heidegger. Ave Nova Roma, Ave us, to us, the future is ours. Signing out.